Hey, welcome to the Relatable podcast. My guest today is Thom Cody. I met Thom a number of years ago when I met him for coffee and talked to him about how I wanted to make the world a better place. And from that, he got me involved in Rotary Youth Leadership Awards, and that has been one of the best things that has happened to me in my life. Truly transformative, and just have learned a lot from doing that and have enjoyed a lot. But invited Thom because of all his leadership from his coaching and his work, both as in business, but also outside of it. He's heavily involved in a number of organizations, doing a lot of work for them, and just really inspiring to have him on. So, Thom, thanks for being my guest today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely. How's everything going with you?
I'm trying to stay warm over here, as I'm sure you're doing over in the cities.
Yeah,
Somebody was telling me today at work that, they were kind of complaining about that it's only 15 degrees. And I said, well, at least there's not a minus sign in front of it.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
they said, well, with the wind chill there is. And I said, well, at least the sun's shining out there. And for now, and so there are some people that I think are fully invested in whatever. So, but
being
I'm good.
unhappy.
I'm good over here, man. I'm
Good,
good. I'm good.
good, great. Well, that's great to hear. Thanks again for coming on.
You bet.
I'll get it started off. Big, kind of the first question I have is, was there a moment or pivot point in your life that changed how you define success?
Wow. That is a great question.
Thank you.
A pivot point where um, yeah, and it's going to be, they say when you do a presentation or somebody's talking to you, you probably shouldn't start out with something like a funeral.
Yeah.
That's not really inspiring,
Mm.
but truth be told, that's probably, as I think back to your question, a pivot point that kind of changed how I measure success and maybe what's important in life, was my grandfather's funeral. My grandfather was an engineer and built, designed and built stuff all over the world. His work took him kind of all over Europe, Africa, South America. He oversaw the design and installation of the largest turbines in the world at the time, and the largest hydroelectric dam in the world at the time in Venezuela. So he was he's probably one of the smartest men I ever know, full of all sorts of wisdom that has followed me through my life. Um, but I would say his funeral, and really the moment was, I was about 20, 22, 23 years old, I guess. Was in 1990, in the spring of 90, actually right about this time of year, a little bit in February. Um, and I remember being at his funeral and being struck by a couple things. The first one was, I marveled over, there was probably 2,000 people at a 72-year-old man's funeral. And the age spread was from my age, at the time, all the way up to people beyond his age, and from literally all over the world. And I wondered about that. And then, of course, as the day progressed, and people came and told their stories of how they knew my grandfather and the impact that he had had in their life. Um, um, there was a couple that really struck me. My grandfather was a recovering alcoholic, and died of esophageal cancer. And he had two goals. One was to make it to his 50th anniversary with my gram, and the other was to make it to his 11th year of sobriety. And I can't remember which one came first, but he made it to 2 o'clock in the morning, the day of the second one. So he made both goals
Yeah.
and passed away quietly at home with my gram. Um, and I think the thing that changed maybe the way I look at success, or define success for me, um, and it really kind of changed probably the way that I engaged people, was the absurdity of a funeral. And what I mean by that is, we are celebrating the life and the impact of somebody, and comparing stories of how this person has profoundly changed our stars, and we're doing it after they're gone. And I found myself pondering, what would it be like if I helped, in my small way, in the circles that I travel in? What would it be like if I actually told people that are still alive? Would they, if they knew how they profoundly impacted my life and my opinion, the lives of other people around them, my operating premise is they'd probably want to do more of that as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to less.
Yeah.
And so success to me was, I'm not going to wait till somebody's gone to celebrate them. I'm not going to wait till somebody's gone to um, help them to appreciate the profound impact they make in the lives of other people, and speak with authority because it starts with the impact that they've had on me.
Yeah.
Um, so, there's more thoughts on that, but that would be, um, kind of the answer, I guess, to your question. It's a great question.
Thank you. No, I think that's I love the way that you approach that. I think you and I have both had some shared experiences of unfortunate situations, and that just really rings true. Of you never know when you're gonna lose somebody, and just sharing that with
Yeah,
people is it's a critical thing to do.
yeah.
So, what is an ongoing struggle you deal with today that people wouldn't expect, given how success is often defined by popular culture?
Hmm. Well, I think probably that is probably the answer right there, right? That probably the ongoing struggle for me is to stay true to, how I define success versus the way the world wants to put success on you.
Yeah,
I've owned my own business. Went into business with my dad in March of 1998.
yeah,
And as a business owner, as a business person, I think it's really easy to get caught up in measuring your success by what's in your bank account, how many clients do you have, uh, the acronyms after your last name on your
yeah.
business card, how many social media followers do you have on the Snapchat or the YouTube. I always used to tease my kids that if you put the in front of social medias, you sound really smart,
Yeah,
and it used to drive my daughter crazy. But I think for me, the ongoing struggle is, where's the balance? And you and I kind of talked a little bit about this before we started today. Where's the balance between the necessary part of being part of the world today, which has a component of all of that, and staying true to thyself, right?
yeah.
Staying true to, um, I have had the blessing of coaching and working with incredible leaders of a couple Fortune 100, $500 billion global companies, and if the measure of success is bank account, they hit the jackpot. And by comparison, I am wanting,
Hmm.
right? So I think that the ongoing struggle for me has always been um, making sure that I'm staying true to the spirit of what I said earlier about my grandfather. At the end of the day, I would consider myself a failure if at my funeral people are talking about, do you know how much money he had? Do you know, how many degrees he had? Do you know?
Yeah,
I would feel myself, I'd be dancing the touchdown dance on my cloud,
yeah.
playing my harp up there,
Mm-hmm.
risking stomping through the floor, if I heard people saying, I can't believe how many people's lives he impacted. I
Mm-hmm.
can't believe, he was my 3 o'clock in the morning person. I can't believe, how awesome it was that he always listened, etc. So I think for me to bring it to a close is, the struggle is really staying true to myself and not letting the noise of everyday world and everyday life and social media and everything else um, shape who I am, as opposed to me shaping who I am, so to
Yeah,
speak.
yeah. We're talking about That brings up kind of two follow-up questions I had. Is there any might be covering some of this later, but are any tools or tactics you use to keep focused on that? Like, as
Yeah, I
making
think
sure you
I think
define your
the
success.
yeah, I think the first one probably is prayer. I'm a Christian. I'm a Catholic Christian, and I uh, in the Catholic faith, there's something called the Cursillo movement that was started back in the early 50s in Spain. I believe it was a Spanish bishop that was going to take a bunch of young people on on the Camino, on the way, the Trail of St. James, and decided that maybe before I take these kids on a 600-mile plus walk, I should do a little catechesis, a little bit of education. And so out of that was born the Cursillo movement, which, has been around certainly in the Green Bay Diocese since the 60s. Um, and so I lived my Cursillo back in 2009, and it's a 3-day long event. And then your fourth day is the rest of your life. So there's a group of men, I call them my fellow knuckleheads, that we get together at a local restaurant every Wednesday morning at 6 a.m. and we talk about life and where are you at in your journey, and what are you doing to stay on the path? What are you reading? Where were your moments closest to Christ? Which is really calling you to what are the things that are important to you.
Yeah.
Sometimes we are helping each other through struggles. I used to be in your chair and be the youngest member of my group. I am now upper middle. The age range probably goes from early 30s all the way up to a couple of crusty old guys that are over 80.
Wow.
And so I would say first and foremost among that would be that group of men, and prayer. I think the only other thing that comes quickly to mind, besides my lovely wife, who keeps me honest, would be a group of friends that are like-minded in terms of serving something bigger than themselves, that are willing to when I'm call me on my stuff, when I'm not being true to who I am, when I am not when I'm caught up in the earthly measures of success, or the society's measures of success. They'll say, the other day I have a friend, it's very, very disrespectful I suspect in some way it's disrespectful to the church, but his favorite quote is to tell you, hey, come down off the cross, we need the wood.
Yeah.
So I probably have that in my head sometimes when
Mhm.
I'm throwing myself around the room having a pity party. So, or saying, isn't it awful, or
Yeah.
whatever have you. So I don't know if that answers your question,
No,
but,
it does. That's
I guess
helpful. Yeah.
first and foremost, that's probably my biggest centering
Yeah.
piece.
Yeah. And then I guess another question around that is, do you feel most people actually believe um, like the that success should be defined by how much money you have and how much is in your bank account, your title? Maybe like if you could talk a little bit about the people that you've worked with, especially in the Fortune 100 billion-dollar companies. I know it's hard to generalize, but what was their take on it?
I think so. We used to have a website. I am a practitioner of one, so and I'm old now, so the need for a website is really, not necessary anymore. But on our website, and if you would have been able to find us back in the day, and you can still, I think, find some old videos of yours truly and some of my teammates on the YouTube, out on YouTube
The
under
interwebs.
uh, yes, the interwebs, where we have a Pathmakers channel, I guess. Um, but the on our website, we used to refer to ourselves not your traditional leadership development firm. And what we meant by that is, I think our approach to things has really been kind of two things: trying to meet people where they're at, uh, and where they're at in their journey, and then being willing to kind of join them in that moment. And what I mean by that is, we use words like love and grace, and kindness, and all along with the whole leadership components of that. And I think especially in the Fortune 100, 500 companies, I've worked with a lot of for-profit, not-for-profit, mom and pop startups, all the way up to a couple $1 billion global companies, as I mentioned before, a number of nonprofits. And I would say there's a common theme in all of them, and that is there's kind of a hunger um, to believe that there's got to be something more. I remember a young leader that I worked with in a construction company who was, just bent on by the time I'm 30, I have to be this. By the time I'm 40, I'm going to be a VP. By the time I'm this, I'm going to be worth that. Um, and if that's, if who am I to tell somebody what their success is, right?
Yeah.
If that's what success means to them, then that's awesome.
Hmm.
I simply would ask people questions like, why is that important to you?
Yeah.
And help me understand why that is your definition of success. And what happens if you don't achieve that? What does that mean to you? Does that mean you failed? Does that mean you know, just challenging people to make sure that they were pursuing what success meant to them versus what they think they are supposed to because of, I work with a lot of family businesses because this is what my mom and dad would want, or this is what my brother would want, or this is what the world says.
Yeah.
Ironically, the young man that was hell bent on being VP by the time I'm 40, um, kind of softened on all of that and said, you know what, if I end up being a senior leader in my company, that would be awesome. And I said, why? And he said, because it would allow me to shape the culture and the experience that my employees have. That I would play a part in shaping the environment that they get to, that has an impact on their families. And it was a very different answer than when we first started working together.
Hmm.
So I would say the short answer to your question would be, I think there's a hunger sometimes to get back to the things that are really more important than other things. And I'm a capitalist, so I am a fan of, if you work hard, you should make money, you should be able to make a living. But I also believe that we have a responsibility in terms of how we do that, the way we treat people in doing that. That we're not being pigs at a trough, that we're giving back to the communities that we serve in, and all the rest of it. Um, I guess that hunger to, maybe I can slow down for a minute and realize that I'm going to wake up someday and I'm going to be 60 years old and wonder, where did all this time go, and what was the quality of time that I spent with my family. I worked with one leader at one point that was married 3 times and was on the cusp of losing his fourth family. Mercifully, he had only had children with his fourth wife.
Yeah.
Um, but he worked all the time. He worked literally 7 days a week. And we had this whole conversation about, what is your ideal? What is most important to you? And he always would talk about his family.
Yeah.
And my gentle but direct pushback was, then why are we sitting here talking about it on a Saturday?
Yeah.
Why are you here on a Sunday? Why are you, you didn't make it to your son's, concert. You didn't make it to your daughter's recital. You didn't,
Yeah.
and you regret that.
Hmm.
My gram used to say to me when I was a kid, young man, if you want things to be different, you need to be different.
Yeah.
And so fundamentally, I think maybe the greatest um, value that I bring to people is, I got a big mouth and I'm willing to ask. You say you want this, but you're doing this. How is that working out for you?
Yeah.
And then, a really wise lady that I thought was the coolest lady in the whole wide world had her own theme music because she hummed everywhere she went. Uh, once asked me, or once told me, young man, if you want things to be different, then you need to be different. And so, um, so maybe that's what I have accomplished in this journey in life, is trying to pour gasoline on that hunger to, find out what success really means to me, as opposed to whatever I'm putting on myself that either my parents, the world, my wife, my husband, my friends.
It's really helpful. Yeah. So, do you think, kind of from a conversation, but feel free to add on to this. Do you think the biggest thing that people get wrong about success is they measure the wrong things, or do you think there's something else to that?
I think, my first gut reaction, which is, typically probably a pretty fair reaction, would be, is that, I think we've kind of spoken to it, right? That people get caught up in. Um, they, I wonder sometimes, have people really taken the time to think about what success really means to them?
Yeah.
and why. And
Hmm.
probably the second part, I think that that why is probably one of the most powerful three-letter words in the universe, right?
Hmm.
It's what uh, drove over 250,000 people to see Dr. King speak on the mall, and there was no 24-hour news cycle, there was
Yeah.
no Snapchat, there was no cell phones to tell everybody, hey, Dr. King's going to be speaking. It was, I think Simon Sinek said it well in one of his TED Talks, the idea that somehow all these people lined up on this day at the right place at the right time. And I would say it's because Dr. King had a really profound why. And it was articulated over and over and over again. And that drew people to him. And so for me, the why of things. I was a kid once, and my parents would tell me I needed to do something, and I was probably that kid that was a pain in the butt because I would always want to know why. And occasionally I got the because I said so, which
Yeah.
was most appropriate, I suspect, at the time. Um, but it was the curiosity, the learning, and the solidification of that this makes sense to me, that I should be pursuing this. And so sometimes I think, especially in the 24-hour 7 day a week cycle, and carrying this around,
Yeah.
the little mini computer that could launch a rocket,
Yeah.
um, that we get caught up in. I don't know if I know what success is. I literally had a conversation with a friend this morning at breakfast about somebody that I'm working with and coaching, and I don't know that anybody's ever asked them what success looks like and means to them. And this is an individual that's 58 years old, and I
Yeah.
think he has been. This individual's been living a life of uh, trying to be successful as the world defined it. Some people are trying to be successful as a way to kind of give the world the middle finger because people were putting things on them when they were kids, and so um, I know that's a long answer to your question, Adam. Is I think it is, again, that coming back to, is it mine, or is it what's being put on me, or what I am putting on myself based on, and have I given myself permission to just sit in, as Matthew Kelly once said, the classroom of silence, and just think about um, what does success mean like to me, and why is that important to me? Why is it worth fighting for? Right? I work with a lot of family businesses over the last 30 years, and I'm working very closely with a family business that I've known for 24 years and watched them go from first generation to second generation, and they're embarking on the second into third generation. And I think about one of the things that I've asked always the next generation that's coming in, why do you want to do this? Because as a business owner, as somebody that was in a business that was founded by my father, it I need to have my own why.
Yeah.
I need to define what success looks like for me, and it can't be guilt and obligation, because that is
Yeah.
not a
And not.
recipe for
Yeah.
happiness, right?
No.
Um,
Yeah.
I wasn't always Catholic, I'm a convert, but I've adopted sometimes the guilt and obligation thing, right?
Yeah.
The joke about us as Catholics that
Yeah.
we're good at guilt, right?
Yeah.
So I think for me, it would just be, people giving themselves permission to take a minute and what is success for me, and why is it important, and why would it be worth fighting for? Um, for whatever reason, I have Mel Gibson in the movie Braveheart in my head, and thinking about the scene at the end of the film where he's been basically eviscerated, and I won't go into graphic detail on that. Look it up on the YouTube if you want to know what it means, or on the Google. Probably the
The
Google would be
Googs.
a better place, but not images. Um, um, and as this is happening to him, the last words on his dying breath was freedom, the word freedom, which to me was his why in that whole film, that whole journey. And I remember the theater being really quiet, and I was there with my mom and a friend, one of my two best friends, growing up. And I'm sure that you've already discerned this. I'm not exactly quiet, um, but I was quiet. And my mom said, "You're awful quiet. What are you thinking back there?" And I said, "Honestly, I'm thinking about what would be so important to me that I would want to use the last breath of my life in my body to cry some word out. What would it be about? And why did the word freedom resonate so powerfully with me? Um, because I think that's what my life is about down here in terms of helping people to understand the one of a kind, unique creation that they are, and to be free to be that, and to pursue what is success to you, to what's important to you, and to be okay about that, and not be embarrassed by it, not to be shamed by it, because I think the world can kind of do that to us sometimes. So
Yeah. No, yeah, I feel like there's a lot of. I know you've told like I remember one story. So go back to the trying to find what success means to you. I think there's a lot of stuff
yeah,
that goes on. Is that people think that that time that they try to do that is. I think there's a layer of things too, and would love your feedback. One, there's not people don't want to take the time to do that because it doesn't feel as
yeah,
productive in today's world.
yeah.
Two, I also think that it can be really hard to, um, I've listened to a lot of interviews from founders and from, people who've achieved a lot of stuff, like from Supreme Court justices to founders of Fortune 500 companies or CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and a lot like you've talked to, and I don't think I think there's a lot of belief that you have to have it all figured out right away, and that does not always that's not nearly always the case. And so I think there's a lot of people who think that they need to have everything figured out at what like when they're at the start of their life, which is insane to think about. But also people not wanting to take not thinking that taking the time to do that is useful, because I know that you like the thing I was going to say is that I know you've talked about silence, and when you're meeting with people and doing working the groups, you'd have a challenge for them if they could stay silent for I think it was 2 minutes. You buy everyone
48
dinner.
seconds.
Yeah, you buy everybody dinner. And there was one time where
Oh,
I think you got to 2 minutes and 47 seconds, and someone ruined it. But I think
yeah.
just that ability to have silence, and in my experience too, working with the groups and allowing for that silence is such a critical piece of it, which people don't want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm a good Catholic, so I can't quote you scripture and verse, but there is a verse in the Bible that's not coming to me in this moment in its entirety, but it talks about be still, and it talks about being at rest. And to me, rest is a verb,
Yeah,
right? I have to consciously choose to be still. I consciously have to choose to rest, and it can be so incredibly powerful. And I think as leaders, as people, especially again with technology, and
yeah,
it's chained to us. Mine's on my hip every day.
yeah,
Um, it is such a temptation. If I got 5 minutes, I'm shopping with my wife for
mm,
ladies' clothing. I'm not
yeah,
buying, she is. Well, I'm buying, she's shopping, right? And I'm sitting there. There's the temptation to get into here and start doing a
yeah,
bunch of stuff versus just being still, watching people, thinking about, where I'm at in my life. What do I want am I where I thought I'd be? Am I doing what I wanted to, what I thought was important? Um, and so, yeah, that bet that I make with leaders, that the greatest unused tool in every leader's toolbox is silence, is asking a powerful question that makes people uncomfortable. It makes their toes curl a little bit,
yeah,
creates a little snugness in places, and then sit there in silence and let the silence work. And the story you're referencing, I can think of a CEO who I once bet the whole team that people can't. I did it individually. That nobody in my experience, nobody's ever made it. No group I've ever been a part of goes longer than 2 minutes and 48 seconds. And if I'm wrong, I'll buy you a steak dinner at your favorite steakhouse. And I'm going to be 60 years old in a month. And I've never paid out on that bet, not because I'm a welcher, because I would gladly go to steak dinner with somebody, because the closest that it's ever come was that particular gentleman. And it was 2 minutes and 37 seconds. And one of his people broke the silence, and he yelled at him, "You son of a, you just cost me a steak dinner." And, pretended to be, feigned indignation and frustration. And yet to him, that was also something to celebrate, because the gentleman that broke the silence was somebody that was one of the quietest people on his team, and was putting his voice in the room in a way for the very first time. And so it was a celebration of success, in that the people that normally fill the silence weren't the ones that filled it.
Yeah.
that it was actually a young man that is full of ideas that has gone on to be one of the senior leaders in that company. And I don't know if it would have happened if they didn't create the chance for silence to
Yeah.
be there, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. What's the worst advice you've been given about success?
boy, I would say the worst would be, um, gosh, I'm thinking about that. So it's funny to me, I guess I try not to collect things in the worst category. I try to collect things in the best category. But if I gave into my gut reaction and first response to your question, it
Yeah.
would be never let them see you sweat,
Okay.
right? As
Yeah.
a leader, you should never let them see you sweat. And while I agree that you should not run around with your hair on fire like a chicken with its head cut off,
Yeah.
um, I would say that being real, being vulnerable, um, has tremendous value as a leader.
Yeah.
Early on in my career, I thought success as a leader meant if my people come with a question, I give them the answer.
Hmm.
They're struggling, they're hurting, I fix it. And that's exhausting to be the zookeeper of everybody's monkeys.
Yeah.
And at one point early on in my career, and thank goodness I had a really great mentor who suggested that there maybe would be another way. And it's okay if you let people see you sweat. It's okay to say, you know what, Adam, that is a fabulous question, and I have no earthly idea in this moment.
Yeah.
If you give me a minute, if you give me, 24 hours of reflection, I promise you I will come back with an answer. So this idea that you always have to be on, you can't let people, you cannot let people know that you don't know what the hell you're doing.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that promotes dishonesty, first of all.
Yeah.
That promotes a lot of pressure
Hmm.
because, again, I've already established I'm a Christian. So, in my way of looking at the world, there's been one perfect human being, and we beat the daylights out of him, spit on him, and hung him on a tree. The
Yeah.
rest of us are just trying to hopefully be a little bit better today than we were yesterday and a little bit better tomorrow. So, I would say the worst would be uh, um, don't ever let them see you sweat. And um, yeah, and that success is, I mean, the trite and easy one to me would be is measure your success by how much you have and the toys you have and
Yeah.
keeping up with the Joneses. And
Hmm.
I've certainly had people in my life that have said that's how you keep score, and I have respectfully chosen to go a different direction and keep score a different kind of way.
Yeah.
And that's, if that's how they keep score, God love them.
Hmm.
That's good. It's just not good for me.
Yeah.
So,
No, I agree. I think that's and I also feel if you never let people and if you don't let people see you sweat or don't let people know what's really going on, I think it also promotes a lot of incompetence within your organization
oh my gosh, yes,
because,
right?
or even or people that you're leading and people that you spend time with because you no, like you said, no one, there's only one perfect person and it's not us.
Right. And I think it also squelches innovation and ideas
Yeah,
exchange, and people don't, why do I have to think if you have all the answers? Why do I need to offer anything if you're the smartest person in every room
exactly.
you're in?
Well,
Which,
I'm the
for the
most
record, I am
smartest.
definitely not. I'm not that guy.
I feel it also, yeah, innovation. Because I was thinking about some of the organizations I help run. My whole thing is to give people our goal that we want, where we want to go, what we want to achieve, and then help them, let them do it themselves in the way that if they have anything that comes up or they need help with something, I can help them figure it out. But I'm not going to be the one that goes, "What's the point of having someone working with someone if you're just going to tell them what to do?" Um, what are your thoughts on people on the idea that people should chase their passion?
Um, I think within reason, I think that's a really great thing, right? And maybe I would change passion to, you know, fulfillment. I once spoke to a group, the Pharmacy Society of Wisconsin, and I was asked to speak. My best friend was becoming the president of this wonderful organization that is, I think at the time was roughly somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 pharmacies from mom and pop, on the corner to the Walgreens to the, to hospital systems, et cetera. And I was asked to speak to their students that were in the pharmacy program that were either just getting started or the people that were about to graduate. And I found myself fascinated by why in the world would they ask me to speak? They're going to be talking about drug interaction and compliance and,
Yeah.
what do we do about people, having pill parties, taking stuff out of grandma's, cabinet and all the rest of the stuff. And then there's yours truly that's going to talk about a calling and that you're in a noble profession and it's like one of these things does not belong. um, you know uh, I think the best part of that day was teasing my friend in front of God and everybody about thank God for HIPAA laws, and he can no longer bellow from the back of the room that my behavior modification medication is ready to go, and something about all medicine is better taken rectally. um, yeah, he's a hoot, man. He's one of my favorite people in the world. I love him to death.
Uh,
Um, but one of the things that I really believe, and that I was talking to that group of people about, is, at some point we all need a job, right? We gotta pay our bills. We gotta put food on the table, clothes on our back. We need to have a roof over our head, and certainly a job hopefully provides that. Hopefully provides health care, which, now I'm at the point of my life where the finish line's right over there, and that's what I worry about is healthcare. Oh my gosh, like, how did I get this old? Um, and what I talked to them about was daring them to believe, first of all, that they were in a noble profession. That most people in their life, they don't want to take medicine, they don't want to take pills, they don't want to feel like they got to have that to be healthy, and they're scared. And so, first of all, to think about that you chose a noble profession that requires an intense amount of schooling, an intense amount of discipline. um, and I think this holds true, quite frankly, across the board. I don't care if you're a garbage man or you're a pharmacist. There's nobility in work, right? There's a dignity in work. And so one of the things I said to them is, you can go through life looking for a job and just, putting in your time in a job. If you're lucky, you will find a career where you feel like you've been called to this career. And if you're really lucky, really diligent, and maybe really give yourself permission to think about what's important to you, what you're passionate about, what fulfills you, you will discover a calling, what you feel like you are called to do. And you may have people that tell you you're foolish for pursuing it. You may have people that tell you, are you nuts? I used to tell my kids, you, I don't care what you do in life for a career, as long as it's legal, oral, and safe, right? Within reason, right?
yeah.
On the safe thing, the moral and the other, all 100%, right? I don't care what that is. And if you come to me one day and you put forth your best effort, and your best effort is, what, I want to be a world class uh, refuse manager. I want to be a garbage man going from gold mine to gold mine every day. That's what's going to make me happy, to know that I am helping keep the world clean and all the rest of it. Then my only request of them was, then have it be your calling. Have it be something that you are so incredibly proud to do. Have it be something that you feel fulfilled by, because we all have an expiration date. Could we agree?
Yeah.
That at some point we're just like milk. We're out of here. We're out of
Yeah.
date. And it's fascinating because it's the one thing that we have that is finite. No, and nobody knows how much of it you're going to get. And yet it is amazing to me the things that we will give our time to that do not fulfill us, that do not, it feels like we're doing our time, and we're waiting to get paroled. And ironically, we're the person that has the keys to the prison that we're locked up
Yeah.
in. And so pursuing your passion, I think if your passion is to be a brain surgeon, but you shake all the time and you
Yeah.
don't have the physical skills to do that, well, then that's being a traditional brain surgeon probably is not a good idea.
Hmm.
But that doesn't mean that you can't study brain surgery, that you can't teach it, that you can't, right? So it's really kind of understanding what you're passionate about. And I think if you tap into that, if you're willing to think about that, it isn't okay, I can only do that as this. The world opens up, the aperture opens up, and there's so many applications maybe for what I'm passionate about. If I'm passionate to serve other people, well, I can do that in a lot of things. I can do that as a pastor, I can do that as a therapist, I can do that as a teacher, I can do that as a coach.
Yeah.
etc.
Yeah.
Right? So,
Definitely.
I think, there needs to be, again, probably some thinking about that, um, and it needs to be, listen to me, it needs to be, I would suggest to be happy, that it needs to be more than something that you're punching the clock for. um, and the reality is, I don't care what job I've ever had, even the jobs that were the best jobs with the best people I ever worked with, you still have days like that,
Hmm.
right? I mean, there's still going to be a day where I'd rather be fishing. Going to
Yeah.
be a day I'd rather be hiking in the mountains.
Yeah.
But in the totality of it,
Hmm.
I love the people that I work with. I feel smarter, challenged, that I'm growing, that I'm making a difference, uh, in doing that. So
That's great. Um, what is one mistake you've made that taught you an important lesson?
I got to pick one. Holy crap! I make learning experiences every day. I remember standing in front of a group of people in a training class in 1989, and I told them that I made my last mistake in October of 1989, and they all looked at me like, "What?" And then I said, "I don't make mistakes anymore. I made my last mistake in 1989."
Yeah.
And I have not made another one since then. And they all were sitting there looking at me like, what an arrogant jerk this guy is. I'm not going to get anything from this guy. And what I came back with is, now learning opportunities, man, I have made tons of those just this morning, right? Because I think, to me, um, a mistake to me is something that feels unresolved,
Okay.
right? I used to run a call, so I'll try to give you an example of what I mean. I used to run a call center. We started with 11 people and grew it to 1,500 people in the insurance industry that was serving clients and customers. And occasionally, believe it or not, even landline technology, the old analog technology, you'd get disconnected sometimes. To me, when I would be working with my teams, and we would be talking about better customer service and how do we provide it and all the rest of it, one of the things that I remember a young person saying one day, um, well, we got disconnected, I guess they'll call back. That to me is a mistake, right? Because you have the power to do something with it. You have the power to fix it, right? You have the power to address it. You can. I know I was talking to Adam Lefquist. I've got his phone number. I'm going to call him back, and
Yeah.
I'm going to say, geez, I'm not sure what exactly happened there. What we were disconnected right in the middle, and I don't know what you heard. Right now, I have had a learning experience, right?
Yeah.
Because I've made it right.
Hmm.
And so I think what's the biggest mistake I've made is uh, pr- probably believing that a moment past is a moment lost, right? That opportunity past is an opportunity lost, meaning, well, I'll have to wait till the next time to rectify it. Versus, no, man, it doesn't. There's no statute of limitations to learning. There's no statute of limitations to being better. Um, so for me, I think that probably the biggest mistake for a while when I was young, believing that what I have in my bank account needs to define my success. That would certainly be large among some of the mistakes that I've made. But again, I guess I've always tried to. Um, I've experienced, like most people in life, everybody's got a story, right? And and this, Adam, I lost a child, right? And so for me, the idea, there's horrible things that we experience in our life's journey. Some are more horrible than others. That was, my Mount Everest of horrible. And yet everything that happens to us is an opportunity, right? Everything that happens to us is an opportunity to do something with it. And I think for me, the mistake would be that I stop at just being grateful that I survived whatever it was, right? I earned the wisdom. My grandfather looked at me once when I was 10 and told me that, you, my son, you are going to go through the school of hard knocks, that engineer guy that built stuff all over the world. So he's a pretty smart guy. And for years, I didn't really know what he meant by that. And when he was dying, um, and I'm 20 some years old, 23, I think, I asked him one day when I was spending the day with him, hey, you remember when I was little and you told me that you, my son, are going to go through the school of hard knocks? And he goes, yeah. And I said, were you trying to tell me I'm not very bright? And he started chuckling and then started coughing because I made him laugh. And he said, on the contrary, I think I've always thought you were a very bright young man and sometimes too bright for your own good. And you're one of those people that has to learn by doing.
Mm-hmm.
You're one of those people that is an experiential learner. And sometimes, and really what I was challenging you with is everything that happens to you in life is either something that you survive and just are grateful to get to the other side and hope it never happens again, or it is a series of things that happen to you in your life that nobody would ask for, but it doesn't change the fact that it's an opportunity.
Yeah.
It doesn't change that there's a nugget of wisdom that you earned in there is kind of where I've gotten to in my conversation with him and reflecting on it for the last, almost 30 years now. Um, is what is the nugget of wisdom? And the mistake to me would be not searching for it. The mistake to me would believe that that all these things are just a series of unfortunate things that happen and there's nothing you can do about it and there's nothing you can do with it. My daughter's been gone for a little over 4 years now, and she still has an impact down here on people, on her friends, on her family, through us. The mistake to me would be to believe that because she's gone, she can't ever impact anybody ever
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yeah.
or that because she only survived to 24, that she missed an opportunity to impact so many people. I don't buy that.
Yeah.
I don't believe that. So I fear I have not answered your question very well, but I guess I just try not to have it stay in the loss category as opposed to, and maybe it's just because I like to win and I'm competitive. I want to get it into I learned something, I did something with it.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
And I think that's a helpful, especially for anybody who's lost a child or someone close to them, and just it's really helpful to understand that it's you can't change the situation of what happened, but you can see the impact beyond that moment in time, and it's not trying to make that moment in time something small, but you can see the bigger impact. Then also the fact that just not letting it be where it is and making a choice to actually have that impact is a big thing as well.
yeah, and I want to be really clear to anybody that's lost somebody or is going through loss, etc. I trust me, man. I didn't get there overnight.
Yeah.
I'm 5 years removed from it, and some days it seems like it was so very long ago, and some days it seems like it was 5 minutes ago.
Yeah.
Um, and to me, I guess I just look at life, leadership, success as a journey, not a destination. I
Yeah.
don't know that we're ever going to get there. I hope personally that I am learning the moment I walk out the door, and maybe I go, I'm sitting in the nursing home or in the hospital or wherever the heck I am, if I'm not blessed to out in the woods where my wife and family leave me because I've become crotchety and I told them, aim me at something beautiful and then say you forgot something and just leave me, you'll know where the body is, right? Is I literally, if I die with somebody with me, I hope my last response is, oh, because I just figured something out or because they just taught me something,
Yeah.
right? I that would be success to me. Going back to your very first question, right? Is that I'm always learning something. I'm always hopefully more today than I was yesterday,
Yeah.
and I'm striving to be more tomorrow. And in some small way, I am participating in daring other people to, maybe join me on that journey. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a crazy guy on a Friday afternoon. Who
There
knows?
might be a little bit of A and a little bit of B too. Could be one of those.
Absolutely,
It could be one of those
absolutely, right?
situations.
What is that? Brilliance is right on the edge of insanity. I probably, I don't know about the brilliance part, but the insanity part, probably
It's
right there.
it's right
So,
there. Uh, who has been a positive influence in your life, and how do they shape the way you think about success or work?
hmm, I would say, I would say, I'm just going to list them. I would
Yeah.
say, Jesus, certainly, whether you believe in Jesus as a divine individual or you're of the other sort that he was a historical figure,
Yeah.
either way, he managed to pour himself into 12 people for a 3 year period of time. And we're still talking about him 2026 years later,
Yeah.
right? So to me, that influences me. Like, holy mackerel, there was no Snapchat. The
Yeah.
YouTube didn't get invented. The
Yeah.
Google, all the cell phones and all the
Uh-huh.
rest of that kind of stuff. Just to clarify, I do know that God does not go in front of all those things. That's a shout out to my daughter in heaven. Um, um, so I would say Jesus, my grandfather, who I've mentioned, my
Yeah.
Gram, who was my mom's mom, who was just this incredible woman. She was the Oscar Mayer Wiener lady. She used to work for Oscar Mayer Company in the lab, as a leader in the lab at a time where women, unfortunately, were not in roles like that. But my Gram was, and you never knew when you went to visit if she would have her Rosie the Riveter do rag on her
Uh-huh.
head underneath, changing the oil on her car, or she might be making blackberry pie or blackberry jam or making, something,
Yeah.
cutting the heads off of chickens for dinner. Who knew, right? So she was a huge person of influence and impact. My mom and dad,
Yeah.
you know, my mom was an incredible woman of service and kindness. Um, I remember she used to raise money for one of the area hospitals. She always volunteered at every hospital that in any town we ever lived in. Um, and we went to visit somebody, and this guy was just, I think he went out of his way to be unpleasant to my mom, to the point where, I'm 19, I'm full of myself, I'm driving Miss Daisy around for these appointments. And I went in with her and I hear this, and I literally was tempted to tell my mother, I forgot something, I'll be right back. And then go in there and tell this gentleman, you will never talk to my mother or anybody else like that, or I'm coming back with a bat.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I did not do that, but I was very quiet in the car later. And she said to me, "Why are you so quiet?" And I said, "I don't get it. That guy was nothing but an absolute jerk to you.
Yeah.
Just a jerk wagon. Like what? And you were nothing but kind." And her first opening salvo was, "Well, honey, we don't know what happened in his life. We
Yeah.
don't know if right before he got to work, he found out that, somebody that he loves has cancer,
Yeah.
somebody that he loves died. Maybe he got a diagnosis. Maybe his wife doesn't want to be with him and he's filed for divorce. We don't know."
Yeah.
And I'm like, I got a lot of work to do. And then she said, and that's what we're called to do down here. Jesus' greatest commandment was to love one another, right?
Uh-huh.
And so we're supposed to be kind to one another. And I'm like, ah, I got a lot of work to do down here. And then my mom, being my mom, reminded me of the Gary Larson of the Far Side comic. It has God in the kitchen with the earth in a pot, and there's a spice rack that says reptiles, birds of the sky, fish, light skinned people, dark skinned people, and he's shaking a canister of seasoning on the earth. And
Yeah.
the think bubble says, just to make things interesting. And the can's label says jerks. And she said, and on the off chance it's one of the people in the red can, because it was colored, the version that we had, it drives them crazy when you're nice to them. And so my mom, my dad's an incredible man of integrity and serving something bigger than you. Father Willie Vanderloo, that little man, he is, if he's 5 feet tall on a good day and God shoved a whole lot in that tiny little package, he's one of the kindest and most brilliant men I have ever met and honored to spend time with. My friend, Father Andy Cribbins, my friend Gina. I mean, the list, it's too long. My kids, you are part of a youth leadership program that I used to be a part of. I think about every kid that went through that program was one of my greatest teachers and a source of incredible influence and inspiration.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I remember sitting having coffee with you,
Yeah.
and you were all wound tight about, I got to make the right decision about the job because it's the rest of my life. And you're like 20 something, not even, right? And it's like, or it's the first thing that you're going to do in your life, and
Yeah.
you can breathe, right? And now look at you, you got a podcast, and I'm on it, and I'm
Mhm.
honored to be so.
It's gonna be on the YouTube too. It's gonna be on the
Yeah,
YouTube.
I can't wait to see it. I'll tell my wife, we got to get out, we got to figure out how to sign on the YouTube on the television.
Exactly. What time does this air? uh, well, thank you for that. That's great. Uh, and you too. You've taught me a lot, so you had a great influence on me. So, what is one book that's influenced how you think about life, work, or success, and why did it matter to you?
So if I will come up with the first book, which, I mean, it would be very trite and easy to say the Bible.
Yeah.
There's lots of good stuff in there. A friend of mine used to call it basic instructions for before leaving Earth, is
Yeah.
what the acronym for Bible is. So that goes without saying. But I think I'm going to cheat, Adam, and I'm going to say Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. I remember rereading that probably about 20 years ago and realizing, well, this is a book I had to read when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And had to read was the key word in that sentence, or words. And then realizing, 20 years later, well, holy buckets, I actually must have really read that book, and it must have had an incredible impact on me and
Yeah.
influence, because it influenced the way that I am going through the world, the way I consult, the way that I coach, the way that I lead, the way that I parent, the whole idea of why,
Yeah.
so that book is a fantastic book. The Five Love Languages by Gary Chapman. The idea that we're not all wired the same, and we would be better served to not only understand what our love language is and to communicate that way, to communicate, help other people to understand that, but equally, if not more important, what is your love language? And not everybody. I'm a hugger, right? I grew up in a huggy family. And some people don't like that you're in my personal space.
Yeah.
And so for me to be aware of that, and that's not their jam. A really great book about leadership, that Spiritual Journey of George Washington, kind of walks you through how his faith impacted his journey to being the president. And here we just got done with a king and went through this horrible war, and they want to make him king, and he's like, did you not pay attention to what we just? No, I'm out.
Yeah.
Right. um, Great book. The Traveler's Gift, The Butterfly Effect. The butterfly effect, I think, will be the one that I would leave you with. And, if I had to go back and only give you one, which I've already cheated.
Yeah.
So, the butterfly effect, because I believe it. It's by a guy by the name of, both Traveler's Gift and Butterfly Effect are by a guy by the name of Andy Andrews. And he takes the hypothesis that was posed by, um, um, oh my gosh, his name just flew out of my head. The gentleman that talked, Edward Lorenz, who was a meteorologist by training and vocation, who in 1969 went before the New York Academy of Science, all the big brains in the world, and posited the butterfly effect, which was a butterfly flaps its wings, which moves air molecules, which move other air molecules, which eventually create a typhoon in Taiwan and a tornado in Texas. And as you might imagine, he was kind of summarily laughed out of the room. I think it was 1962. So some 30 years later, independent physicists around the globe proved that his theory was in fact accurate. And so in the scientific world, many people look at him as the giant of chaos theory, which most people know from Jeff Goldblum in Jurassic Park, putting the drop of water on Laura Dern's hand as he's hitting on her
Yeah.
to explain how chaos theory works. And Andy Andrews takes that theory and applies it to us as human beings and the number of people that you will have an impact on in your life. And he uses some historical figures to illustrate that. And it's crazy to me to think about that in your lifetime, and I Googled this on the Google, that the average human being in your lifetime this way, face to face, which this isn't quite face to face, you will impact 800 in a 50-year lifespan, you will impact 840,000 people. And if we add in this and using, social media and all that kind of stuff, technology, it will be 84 million people in your 50 years, which says to me, we need to be mindful of what is the impact we're having? What
Yeah.
is the messages that we're putting on
Mm-hmm.
Facebook
Mm-hmm.
and Snapchat
Yeah.
and Instagram and the X and,
Yeah.
all the rest of that good stuff.
Uh-huh.
So you ask me simple questions and I give you way more than what you want.
I
Sorry.
enjoy it. It's a lot better than, yes, that's a great book. Next question, please.
Isn't it true?
I like this book because it's a good book and it taught me that you should read. What else do you want? Well, we're actually at the last question, but we can open it up if you have anything else you want to talk about. But you mentioned this a little bit at the start of the podcast. But How do you stay grounded as expectations, responsibility, or visibility increase?
I think I would probably, um, it would probably be a combination of what I just was talking about in terms of the butterfly effect. Um, Watching the impact. I was at a wedding with my wife back in July of this year, which was right around um, the fourth anniversary of my daughter's passing, and it was actually one of her. Uh, it's a set of twins that were friends of hers in college, and I found myself traveling down to Schaumburg, Illinois, to go to a wedding of a girl who I have literally spent. You can put the total of time that I've spent with this young lady on the tip of my finger, right? And I mean, she's lovely. Her sister is lovely. My daughter just loved them, and vice versa. When my daughter passed, they came to her funeral. The two girls are very good about, staying in touch with my bride and occasionally the old gray haired guy. Um, but I said to my wife, "Isn't it amazing that we're going to a wedding of two of this young lady that we really don't know? And this is my first experience of going to a wedding where I won't know anybody." We were hopeful that we would know my daughter's best friend, who's like my favorite other daughter, is how she comes up when she calls me on my phone, um, Erin, but she was standing up in the wedding. So we really were kind of at a table all by ourselves with strangers, and um, and we get to the reception, and on a table they have like a remembrance table of all their family, right? Grandmas and grandpas and a couple of uncles that have passed away, and right in the center of the table is a picture of my daughter, and they wanted her to be a part of the wedding. And we were introduced to the young lady's mom. And she said, "I'm sorry, who are you?" And as soon as she said, "These are Hannah's mom and dad," her mom burst into tears and was like, "Your daughter was so amazing. She was one of our favorite." So literally, I spent an entire evening where I was fearful. I literally am shamed to say to my wife that I said to my wife, "Well, the good news is we can get out of here by like 7
Yeah.
and go do something else, right? Because nobody will know us and care."
Yeah.
I think we were walking out the door at quarter to 12. Um, and every single person that found out, we were Hannah's mom and dad,
Yeah.
and I was so proud to be known as Hannah's mom and dad. So here's my child that is gone, who is still having an impact. There's a young lady in the wedding party that was in tears, that wanted to meet us. She's holding my daughters. They're dancing to Dancing Queen, which
Yeah.
has a big thing in my house. It's a story for another day. Um, they requested that from the DJ, and they have my daughter's picture, and all the girls are all dancing on dancing, to Dancing Queen. And then her twin sister comes up to Sandy and I, introduces us to her fiance, and says, we haven't sent out save the date yet, but you have to be at our wedding next year in June." And I said, "Honey, I wouldn't miss it."
Yeah.
Um, so to me, I think staying grounded is realizing the power of one life, right? The impact that one life has in the lives of so many people. And I think sometimes I kind of get shook up about it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we grossly, and I mean grossly, underestimate the impact that we have in the lives of so many other people. For all of you watching this podcast, this young man and I were having a conversation before we started, and I said, "Were your ears ringing this week?" A couple of days ago, because I quoted him as he took over this youth leadership program. He had some really incredible wisdom that he would lay down on the kids. Like in the famous words of Maya Angelou, "You better check yourself, or check thyself before you wreck thyself." Or in the immortal words of Abraham Lincoln at the Gettysburg Address, "What, are you kidding me?" You know, um, and I think about the number of lives that my man Adam has impacted, or my Graham, who's been gone for 30 years, has on so many people, because I talk about her all the time. Because she impacted me, she's still impacting people through me.
Yeah.
So I think staying grounded is I think of God's greatest commandment, that we're supposed to love each other down here, and that, let's be honest, sometimes that's hard.
It is.
You
Yeah.
know, it's hard to do that, especially when somebody is not particularly being lovable. Um, you know, but it doesn't mean they don't deserve dignity and grace and kindness and love just the same as anybody else.
Yeah.
And so I think I have to remind myself of that. I have to remember the fact that in my lifetime, if I'm blessed to do so, that I could have an impact on 840,000 people,
Hmm.
one on one over my lifetime because, of the butterfly effect, that if I
Yeah.
come in contact with 100 people a day and am I putting a giddy up in their step or am I putting oh my God, in their step, right?
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
then they're going to go and do that with the 100 people that they come in contact with. So I think just that whole idea of the power we have to be a force for good down here. And I believe that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and I want to be about that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, so those are all the questions I have. Anything you wanted to end? Any notes you want to end the podcast on or the interview on?
I don't think so. I mean, I shared your immortal wisdom of, don't wreck, check yourself before you wreck yourself. So I think that's a high
I
note.
think that's that.
I think the only thing that I would offer is, if I think about when I met you, Adam, we weren't talking about podcasts. We weren't
Yeah,
talking about a youth leadership program. We weren't talking about a lot of things. And I think about the difference that you've made. And I think about, I'm sure along the way, whether it's your mom and dad, it's friends, it's people around you. What are you doing, Adam? Doing that kind of stuff. And,
yeah,
my gosh, you're in Minnesota and you're doing a youth leadership program back in Wisconsin. You need to focus on,
yeah,
right? If this is important, if something's important to you, pursue it. Um, be open to the Holy Spirit guiding your journey and be courageous.
yeah,
I will leave you with one last thought, and it's
yeah,
from my gram again. I moved 9 times before I was 12.
yeah,
So that meant I was at 3 different grade schools, 2 different middle schools, mercifully one high school.
yeah,
Um, but it meant that I got to be the new kid and got hazed and all that fun stuff that you go through as fresh meat at a new school. And I remember lamenting to my gram about this whole experience and how scared I was, and to go to yet another school up in Green Bay, the frozen tundra, wherever the heck that was, right? Um, and my gram said, honey, I don't think I can ever make your butterflies go away, but you can teach them to fly in formation. And, she was an interesting lady. She would tell you something. My response, typically, because I didn't get it because I was 7, was, what? To which she would say it again. And then that would be it. We'd be off to finishing making pie or picking blackberries or whatever it is that we were doing. And so to me, I would say there's a lot of things. One year in RILA, the organization that you talked about, the kids picked the theme, as you well know, for the year. The quote was from Eleanor Roosevelt: "Do something that scares you. Do one thing every day that scares you."
yeah,
And I couldn't agree more.
yeah,
Get comfortable in your discomfort and do something that scares you. And you can teach those butterflies to fly in formation. You don't have to be afraid of them.
yeah. That's great.
So
Well, thank you so much for being for joining me and for all the wisdom and insights you've shared. It's been great. Always love talking to you and love you. So thank you for
right back
that.
at you, brother. Love you for that.
Thank you. And yeah, so thank you everyone for joining us. And this is wraps up the episode of Relatable. So thank you so much.